Welcome to a detailed description of the Adaptive Interface's Osm-100 Oil Status Monitor. This is an instrument designed for use in home-built and experimental aircraft, and it simultaneously shows engine oil temperature and engine oil pressure. Right now the instrument is showing, for demonstration purposes, an oil temperature of 195 degrees Fahrenheit and an oil pressure of 48.5 psi, or pounds per square inch. Using the function button on the instrument, this display can be changed from English to metric. We'll do that now. Now the instrument is showing the oil temperature and pressure as 91 degrees Celsius and 36 kilopascals. Pressing the function button again on the instrument brings you back to an English type measurement. Other functions of the front panel are the up and down arrows. In normal operation of the instrument, these are used to control the LED digit brightness and LED indicator brightness. And we'll show that right now. We can dim the instrument. We can bring it up a little bit. And we'll kind of leave it set here for the rest of the demonstration. The other button on the instrument is the alarm button. In the normal operating mode of the instrument, that is used to turn off the alarm condition if an alarm condition exists. And the instrument can be set for a high or a low temperature alarm or a high or a low pressure alarm. In other functions, the alarm button is used as an enter button to enter and change values. The instrument operates on a series of menus. Right now, the standard operating mode of the instrument is referred to as menu level 0 or the main menu. There are three other menus levels on the instrument. The first menu level will allow you to enter different options for the instrument, such as the control of the display brightness, an update value, and the selection of different types of oil pressure and oil temperature sensors. We'll get into that in a minute. Another function that the instrument has is an internal backlight, and that can be adjusted with an external control voltage or normally done with a potentiometer or control on the instrument panel. And as to demonstrate that, we can turn the display backlight almost completely off, and we can lighten it up as well. And that's during different flying conditions and lighting conditions. You can set it to whatever you need. We'll kind of set it back at an optimum level right here. Again, the instrument is controlled through a series of menus. What we'll do to get into the first menu level is press the function button in and hold it in for about 5 seconds. And the instrument is now in menu level 1, which are the various options for the instrument. The first option or function is the display brightness function. There are three options for this function. Right now it's set for front panel, which means that the up and down arrows are what control the brightness of the display. Another function is a photocell control option. If this is selected, the buttons become inoperative, but the display is powered or brightened and dimmed using a photocell, which is at the bottom of the front panel of the instrument. We'll go ahead and do that right now. We'll set it, and to select this option, you press the alarm button. Again, it's used as an enter button on the instrument right now. And now it's set into a photocell mode. Notice that the display is a little bit dim because the lighting right now is on the dim side. We'll use a flashlight to brighten up the light going into the photocell and show what happens. As you can see, the instrument brightens up in bright light. When the bright light goes away, if it dims, it goes back down. Another option for the instrument is an external brightness control voltage. This allows you to use a potentiometer or a control on the instrument panel to adjust the digit display brightness, and we'll go ahead and demonstrate that. This is selected. Let's just kind of go through the different options here. We have front panel, photocell, external, and they just kind of cycle through. So what we'll do is we'll set it to external. And for demonstration purposes, let's show what the display looks like here. First, what we'll do is we'll go through the functions until we get to a return to menu 0 function, or return to the main operating mode of the instrument function. And we can demonstrate right now what the external brightness does. So I'm using an external brightness control right now, and as you can see, that can be used to adjust the display brightness on the instrument. Let's go ahead and set that back to front panel control. To do that, we'll press the function button, hold it in for 5 seconds. We're in menu level 1. Our first function here is the brightness control. We'll go ahead and update that to front panel control. And that should now be the mode that the instrument is operating in. We'll click through some of the other functions. Go back, and you can see that now the front panel up and down arrows control the brightness of the display. Let's go through some of the other functions and options that are available in menu level 1. Again, to get there, we press the function button and hold it in. And by pressing the function button again repeatedly, you can go through the different options that are available, including the return to main function. The next function is the auto dim function. This can be either set to on or off. If it's set to on, the auto dim function works when the instrument is in the front panel brightness control mode, but it also then works with the photocell as well. And if the airplane or the instrument is going from a low light condition to a high background light condition, it'll automatically brighten up the display. If it's going from a high brightness condition to a low brightness condition, say going flying in the from daytime into evening, the photocell will automatically dim the display. And after that, you can still use your up and down arrows to control it. I won't demonstrate that right now, it's a little time consuming. So let's just go to the next function here. The next function is the update period. The instrument actually measures temperature and pressure 250 times a second and could update the display that fast as well. Unfortunately, if there's a changing value in the display, which is often the case with an engine running, the display would be flickering between different values very quickly, and it could be a real bad distraction to the pilot. Therefore, the instrument is set to update, at least right now, once every second. And that can be changed. It can be changed up to a 5-second update period. That means you have to wait 5 seconds for the new values to show up on the display. Or it could be down to as short as a half a second. Again, to set this value, we can kind of go through the different values using the up-down arrows. And when we find a value we like, press the alarm button, which again is used as an enter button. And now the update is set at half a second. Next function is the selection of the type of sensor that is used for the temperature. The little degree symbol represents temperature. And the different sensor types that this instrument can work with are a resistive type sensor, which is probably the most common to be used. The next type of sensor is an electronic sensor that provides an output of 0 to 5 volts depending on the temperature it's reading. And the third type of sensor is an LM335, which is a common solid state type temperature sensor. And again, the instrument can be selected for one of those three types. Right now we're going to leave it in the resistive sensor mode or selection. And we'll go over to the next function, which is the type of sensor that can be used for a pressure sensor. In the case of this instrument, it can also use a resistive type pressure sensor, which is probably the most common, a 0 to 5 volt output electronic type sensor, and also the next most common type of sensor, which is a current loop sensor. Standard current loop sensors normally work between 4 milliamps and 20 milliamps and have different pressures associated with those values. And again, to start off with, we'll leave it in a resistive pressure sensor mode. Next function is a double return symbol, which means return to main or return to menu level 0. We'll go ahead and do that. And again, we're back to displaying the normal mode of the instrument, which is showing oil temperature and pressure. The next menu is menu level 2. This is the alarm menu, and to get to that, what we do is first go to menu level 1 by holding the function button in for 5 seconds, releasing the button. As you can see, we're now in a menu 1 selections. From anywhere in this menu, if you press the function button and hold it in for 5 seconds, you now go into menu level 2. And there are 4 alarm settings that can be done on the instrument. Right now the defaults are to have the alarm values turned off, and we'll wait until I do a demonstration of the alarms before we turn them on, but to show you what they look like. The first alarm is a temperature, as you can see the little degree symbol, alarm, and low. So that would be a low temperature alarm. That way the instrument would go into an alarm condition if a temperature dropped below a certain value. That particular alarm will not kick in until the instrument has been on for about 8 minutes, which gives you time for an engine to warm up and not set the alarm off before the engine gets up to temperature. And that can be selected in 5-degree increments, from basically 0 degree or 5 degrees Fahrenheit up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, wherever you want the low alarm to be. We'll again set it to off. The next function is a high temperature alarm. Default is off, but again it can be adjusted to anywhere from 5 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit in 5-degree increments. We'll bring it back, and in this case, if the temperature exceeds the temperature set for the alarm, the instrument will go into an alarm condition. Next alarm is a low pressure alarm. Right now it's set to off, but it can be set anywhere from 5 psi, if we tab down, to 100 psi in 5 psi increments. Now we can advance to the next function. As long as we don't hit the enter button or the alarm button, this value will not be entered into the instrument. It will go back to the default or the last value that it was set at, which was off. So we can advance to the next function. Again, if we go back to the pressure low, again it's off. Pressure high, you can set another value anywhere from 5 to 100 psi. And in this case, if the pressure exceeds that on the value, that's the pressure that the alarm condition will start going on. And again, we don't need to set that right now. It's more or less set at off. If we cycle up through past 100, we go to the off setting. The next function is a single return. This return will bring you back to menu level 1, or it's a return 1 level function. The next function is again the double return symbol, which is return to menu level 0 or the standard operating mode of the instrument. We'll go ahead and do that. And again, we're back into showing the temperature and pressure. The third menu level is a set of calibration data points, and we'll go ahead and get into that. And that is what allows the user to use many different types of pressure and temperature sensors. To use those, all you have to know is two temperatures and the value of the sensor, 2 pressures and the value of the sensor at those pressures. And we'll show kind of how to get into that and how that works. To get into menu level 3, we press the function button in once, hold it for 5 seconds. When it gets into level 1, we release it. We can press it again and hold it for 5 seconds. It'll go into level 2. And again, press the function button and hold it in for 5 seconds. And now we're in menu level 3. And I'll kind of go into a description of all the different functions and calibration data points. Again, for each sensor, for a temperature sensor, you have to have 2 data points. One is the value of the sensor and the temperature associated with that value. And so right now, because we're using a resistive type temperature sensor, the value is the resistance of the sensor in ohms. In this case, there's a decimal point. If you see a decimal point, that means that the value displayed is in kiloohms or thousands of ohms. So right now it is set at 3.54 kiloohms or 3,540 ohms. This value can be raised and lowered. Another function of the instrument is if you want to raise it quickly, you can hold the button in and it'll automatically start advancing. And it'll advance the least significant digit and it will continue, and once that goes past 0, it'll start advancing the more significant digit to make it a little faster to get to the value that you want. We'll go ahead and enter this as 5,200 ohms or 5.2 kiloohms. That goes to the next data point, and before that the symbol up above says it's the degree symbol, so it says that it's temperature, and a single low bar indicates that it's the first data point for the temperature. Next function will be the low data point for the temperature, and in this case we're looking at a temperature value associated with that data point. Right now it's set for 70 degrees. That can be changed in 1 degree increments. We'll go ahead and just leave it at what it is and go on to the next function. The next function here is the second data point for the temperature sensor. In this case it's showing 348. There is no decimal point, so it's showing 348 ohms for that particular sensor. It can be changed, but we'll just leave it there. The next data point is the temperature associated with the 348 ohms. In this case it's set at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. When setting the data points, they are always set in English values of Fahrenheit or PSI. They are not set in metric. The next function here is the first data point for the pressure sensor. Again, the pressure sensor right now is set at a resistive pressure sensor, so it is currently set at 10 ohms with an associated pressure of 0 psi. The next is the last or the second pressure data point. It's showing 180 ohms. Press the next function, and that's associated with a pressure of 150 psi. Again, to set temperature and pressure with this instrument using different types of sensors, you simply need to know 2 different data points of the sensor. If it's a temp sensor, you need to know the data point for 2 different temperatures, and same thing for a pressure sensor. As long as you can find 2 data points for the pressure, you'll be able to set the instrument. It sets up a linear curve and it calculates the pressure from the sensor based on that curve. So that is the last of the functions of the instrument. You again have an option to go back 1 level to menu level 2, which is the alarm menu, or go back to menu level 0, which is the main operating mode of the instrument. Now what we'll do, when we were setting the data points for the pressure, we were using resistive values because we had a resistive pressure sensor selected. Say we want to use an electronic pressure sensor and an electronic temperature sensor. What we'll do is we go to menu level 1, which is the options of the instrument. We'll hit the function button until we get to the pressure sensor or a temperature sensor selector. Right now it's set for a resistive sensor. Say we want to use an electronic sensor, and in this case the sensor has to output a 0 to 5 volt output. The other sensor is a LM335. We'll get into that later. Right now let's just go ahead and set the instrument to use an electronic sensor. We can go to the pressure sensor and do the same thing. We can set it for an electronic sensor. Now, if we go to the calibration menu, and we can get there by holding the button in for 5 seconds to get to level 2. Hold it again to get to level 3, the calibration data points. And now what we see is instead of a resistive value, we have a voltage value, which is pretty easy to tell because of the decimal point here. We know that we've selected an electronic sensor. This voltage value can be changed in hundredths of volts. It'll automatically advance if you want, faster. And it can be set anywhere from 0 volts to 5 volts. And we'll bring it down to 5 volts by holding the button in. Now we're set at 5 volts and we can go to 499, whatever we want to use. Right now we'll just go ahead and leave it at 0 volts. The second value is again the actual temperature associated with that data point. Next function is a value of the sensor. Right now the default is set for 5 volts. It can be lowered or actually brought up past 0 to whatever value you want. And you can associate a temperature with that as well. Next function is the associated temperature, which is 180 ohms. Now we're going to go to the data points. By continuing pressing the function button, we can go to the data points for the pressure sensor. Again, it's electronic 0 to 5 volt sensor, which can be set for whatever voltage is associated with that sensor. And we again have a data point. Right now it's set at 0 psi. It can be set in 1 psi increments, anywhere from 0 to 300 psi. Not that we'd go that high, but the instrument can be set that way depending upon the the response curve of the sensor. So we'll just leave it at 0 psi for now. Next data point is again an electronic output of an electronic sensor output of 5 volts. Can be adjusted, and an associated pressure with that voltage, which is right now set at 150 psi. Let's go back one level to the alarms. We can go this way, go back one more level to the options, and now we can see what happens when we change the resistive sensor from an electronic sensor to an LM335. And the pressure sensor, the options are again a current loop sensor, a resistive sensor, and a 0 to 5 volt output electronic sensor. And let's go ahead and set it for current loop and see what our options are now. We'll go back up to the calibration values by holding the button in. First we've got to go to alarm levels, and then we can go up to the calibration data point values on menu 3. And now our options for a temperature sensor are always going to be LM335. There are no data points with an LM35 because it already has a set of values and the instrument is designed to know what those values are. So right now our temperature setting options remain LM335. But when we get to the pressure, we're going to be using most pressure sensors are 40 milliamps to 20 milliamps. So the default value for the first data point is the 40 milliamp or 4 milliamp value, excuse me. That can also be changed if needed. Right now we'll just leave it at 4 milliamps. And again, there's a pressure associated with that, in this case 0 psi. The next data point would be the second data point for pressure, which right now shows 20 milliamps on a current sensor, and a pressure value of 150 psi. These values will change, the bottom value will be dependent on what type of a sensor has been selected in menu level 1. So let's just go back and I'm going to go back to the main menu, and because of the different sensor values, we're getting different values on the front of the instrument. Let's go back and set those back to resistive sensors, because that's what is set up for this demo. Let's go back and we can set our temperature sensor to resistive. Press the alarm or the enter button. Same thing with the pressure sensor. We'll go back to a resistive sensor and go back to the main menu, and we should be back at our demo temperature and pressure values. So the next thing to show is the alarm conditions, and right now we're showing a temperature of 195 degrees Fahrenheit. If we were to set a high alarm value at 190 degrees Fahrenheit, this should put the instrument into an alarm condition. So let's go ahead and do that. Menu level 1. We go to menu level 2 for the alarms. And let's go ahead and go to the temperature high alarm and set that at 190. And again, we can use the just hold the button in, it'll go where it belongs type function, and we can bring it back up, set it at 190, go back to our main menu, and because there is a timer in the instrument will have to wait about 2 minutes before it goes into an alarm condition. So we will stop the tape and come back when the alarm condition starts. Okay, we now have an alarm condition for the oil temperature. Again, the alarm was set at 190 degrees Fahrenheit and the instrument is reading 195, and this is what happens when it is in an alarm condition. This display brightens up to full brightness, and the value that is showing the alarm condition, in this case the temperature, is flashing to let us know that we have a high temperature. Also, there is an electronic output from the instrument that has been turned on the rear panel of the instrument that can turn on a warning light or a warning buzzer as well. Now is when the alarm button on the front of the instrument comes into play. If we want to turn off the alarm condition, we can press the alarm button as such. The instrument goes back to its normal mode of operation, and a 2-minute timer is again started, and if the alarm condition still exists after 2 minutes, it will go back to flashing and be in an alarm condition. Again, this can, if the alarm condition goes away, the instrument will continue to operate in a normal operating mode. If the alarm condition exists still, you can continually press the alarm button to turn off the instrument and work on the problem as you're flying. That is about it for the description of the functionality of this instrument. Please refer to the user's manual for more detailed information and information on installation and more details on the operation of the instrument.